The scene opens with a knock on a door. A tired-looking black woman, visibly pregnant, stands outside holding a small suitcase in one hand and her 3-year-old son in the other. Her son clings to her leg, looking confused and scared. The flat owner, an older man with a cold expression, opens the door. His face is stern as he stares at her. "You're late on rent again," he says sharply. "I've had enough. Pack your things and leave by tomorrow." The woman's voice trembles as she pleads, "Please, sir, I just need a little more time. I've been struggling since my husband passed. I'll pay as soon as I can." But the man's expression hardens. "That's not my problem. You people always have excuses. I don't want to hear it. Get out." He slams the door in her face, leaving her standing there in shock. Her child starts to cry, asking, "Mommy, where will we go now?" The woman fights back tears, trying to comfort her son. She looks around at the small flat they've called home, now knowing they have nowhere else to go. The flat owner, Mr. Wilson, is a middle-aged man known for being strict and unfriendly. He runs his property with an iron fist and doesn't care much about the struggles of his tenants. He believes in hard work, but also looks down on people he thinks are different from him. To him, anyone who can't pay rent on time doesn't deserve his sympathy. The tenant, Sarah, is a kind-hearted black woman in her late 20s. She is heavily pregnant and has a 3-year-old son named Liam. Just a few months ago, her life was very different. Her husband, Daniel, was the family's strength and provider. He worked hard to make sure they had a roof over their heads. But everything changed the day he died. Since then, Sarah has been struggling to make ends meet. She spends her days looking for jobs and her nights trying to calm Liam, who still asks for his dad. She often skips meals to save money, but despite her efforts, the bills keep piling up. She has no one to turn to, and her only hope is to survive until she can find steady work. Sarah's flat is small but filled with memories of her husband. A photo of him hangs on the wall, reminding her of his love and sacrifices. Every time she looks at it, she tells herself to stay strong for Liam and the baby growing inside her. But as the eviction looms over her, Sarah feels like she's running out of time. One morning, Mr. Wilson walks past Sarah's flat and notices her son playing with a broken toy on the porch. He frowns and shakes his head. To him, the mess outside reflects the type of people he believes Sarah is. Later that day, he knocks on her door with a stern look on his face. When Sarah opens the door, she looks tired and worried. Liam stands quietly beside her, holding onto her dress. Mr. Wilson doesn't waste any time. "You're behind on rent again," he says coldly. "This is the 3rd month in a row." Sarah tries to explain. "I'm trying, Mr. Wilson. I've been looking for work, but it's been hard since my husband." But he cuts her off. "Don't give me excuses. You've had enough time. I can't keep letting this slide. If you can't pay by tomorrow, you need to leave." Tears well up in Sarah's eyes. "Please, I just need a little more time. I have no family nearby and nowhere else to go. My son and the baby." Her voice trails off as she fights back tears. Mr. Wilson's expression doesn't change. "That's not my problem," he says flatly. "I run a business, not a charity. People like you shouldn't live here if you can't afford it." Sarah's heart sinks. She tries to reason with him, but he raises his hand to stop her. "Enough," he says firmly. "If you're not out by tomorrow, I'll call the police." As Mr. Wilson walks away, Sarah collapses onto the couch, holding her crying son. She looks around their small flat, feeling helpless. Memories of her husband fill the room, and her chest tightens. She has no idea where they will go or what to do next. A few months ago, Sarah's husband, Daniel, was alive and full of life. He was a kind and hard-working man who loved his family deeply. He worked long hours as a delivery driver to provide for Sarah and Liam. Despite the challenges, he always found time to play with Liam and make Sarah laugh. He often told her, "No matter how hard things get, we'll face them together." One rainy afternoon, Daniel was driving home when he saw a crowded bus struggling to stop at a sharp turn. The road was slippery, and the bus skidded dangerously close to the edge of a steep hill. Without thinking twice, Daniel pulled over and ran toward the bus. He shouted for the driver to open the door. The passengers inside were screaming in panic. Daniel climbed in and quickly realized the brakes had failed. The bus was rolling closer to the edge. Thinking fast, he told the driver to steer while he used his strength to help slow the bus from behind. With all his might, Daniel pushed against the bus's rear tires, creating enough friction to slow it down. His brave actions gave the driver enough control to guide the bus to a safer area. The passengers cheered and thanked Daniel, calling him a hero. Among them was an elderly woman who was trembling with fear. She held Daniel's hand and said, "You saved us. I don't know how to thank you." But before Daniel could reply, the bus shifted slightly, and he lost his footing. He fell under the bus as it finally stopped. The passengers rushed out to help him, but it was too late. Daniel had sacrificed his life to save them. Sarah still remembers the day she got the news. She was at home playing with Liam when a police officer knocked on the door. Her world shattered when she learned what had happened. She was heartbroken, but also proud of her husband's bravery. She clings to the thought that he died a hero, saving lives, even though it left her and Liam alone in the world. What Sarah doesn't know is that one of the people Daniel saved that day was Mr. Wilson's mother. The elderly woman had been on the bus, returning from visiting her son. She survived because of Daniel's selfless act, but the connection between her and Sarah has yet to be revealed. The day after Mr. Wilson tells Sarah to leave, a neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, sees her sitting outside the flat with Liam. Sarah looks defeated, holding her belly protectively as Liam plays quietly beside her. Mrs. Jenkins walks over and asks gently, "Are you okay, dear?" "What happened?" Sarah wipes her tears and explains everything. She talks about her husband, Daniel, and how he died saving a bus full of people. She explains how hard life has been since then, trying to make ends meet while raising her son and preparing for her baby's arrival. Mrs. Jenkins listens carefully, her face softening with sympathy. She remembers hearing about a brave man who saved a bus months ago. It was all over the news. Her heart aches as she realizes that Sarah's husband was that man. Later, Mrs. Jenkins visits Mr. Wilson. She finds him in his garden, pruning roses. "Wilson, I need to talk to you," she says firmly. "Do you know who Sarah's husband was?" Mr. Wilson looks uninterested. "I don't care who he was. She hasn't paid her rent, and that's all I need to know." Mrs. Jenkins shakes her head. "You should care. Her husband, Daniel, was the man who saved your mother's life. Remember the bus accident a few months ago? Your mother told me how a brave man stopped the bus from crashing. That man was Sarah's husband." Mr. Wilson freezes, his clippers falling to the ground. "What are you talking about?" he asks, his voice trembling. Mrs. Jenkins continues, "Your mother wouldn't be alive today if it weren't for him. He gave his life so others, including her, could live. And now, you're throwing his pregnant wife and child out on the street? How could you?" The words hit Mr. Wilson like a ton of bricks. He remembers the day his mother came home, shaken but alive, and how she couldn't stop talking about the man who saved her. He feels a wave of guilt wash over him. He had judged Sarah unfairly without knowing her story. For the first time in years, Mr. Wilson feels shame. He realizes he has made a terrible mistake and hurt the family of the man who saved his mother's life. He decides he must make things right before it's too late. The next day, Mr. Wilson arrives at Sarah's flat. He stands outside for a moment, unsure of how to approach her. His heart is heavy with guilt, and he knows he must apologize. He finally gathers the courage and knocks on the door. Sarah opens the door slowly, looking tired and sad. Her son is in the background playing quietly with a toy. She looks surprised to see Mr. Wilson standing there. I came to apologize, he says, his voice softer than usual. I didn't know about your husband. I didn't know he was the one who saved my mother's life. Sarah's eyes widen and she steps back, letting him in. You know? She asks, her voice shaky. Mr. Wilson nods. I was wrong. I judged you without understanding, and I treated you badly. You don't deserve that. Tears start to form in Sarah's eyes. She's been through so much, and hearing Mr. Wilson's apology feels like a small weight being lifted from her shoulders. She had never expected him to come and admit his mistake. I don't know what to say, Sarah whispers, holding her stomach. You don't have to say anything, Mr. Wilson replies. I should have helped you, not made things worse. I'm sorry for kicking you out. He pauses, then continues. I've decided that you and your son can stay in this flat. No rent for as long as you need, and if you ever need anything, I'll be here to help. Sarah is silent for a moment, feeling a mix of relief and disbelief. She never thought this would happen, but now she feels a small sense of hope. Thank you, she says softly, her voice filled with gratitude. I don't know what to say, but thank you. Mr. Wilson nods. You don't need to thank me. I should have done this from the start. I will never forget what your husband did for my mother. As Mr. Wilson leaves the flat, Sarah watches him walk away, feeling a sense of peace she hasn't felt in months. For the first time since Daniel's death, she feels like things might start to get better. And, with a heavy heart, but a hopeful spirit, she returns to her son, knowing they are safe for now. We hope you enjoyed this story. For more related stories I requested, please subscribe our channel. And don't forget to like, share, and comment where from you watch.